Are we live? We are live. What is happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic Thanksgiving Eve. Are you on the road driving? You're already at the in-laws or the folks' house or the destination? I feel bad for you. Anyway, wanted to get with you guys tonight. I'm going to chat specifically about Hellcats, mainly because, well, this is a bit self-serving in one respect. CFL's in, got the arm flex, I like it. This is a little bit self-serving in one respect. I get a lot of questions from new Hellcat owners. So I wanted to go over kind of Hellcat 101. But recently, this has been something Michael Corleone said, happy Thanksgiving. Thank you very much. Boosted Hemis in the house. Got the arm flex. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Michael. Appreciate that, bud. But I wanted to talk specifically about the Hellcat because we've got a lot of first-time Hellcat buyers. It seems like there's been a bit of a wave. Lots of folks have found the channel through a lot of the Hellcat content, especially the fact that I'm doing everything stock boost. And so I'm getting a lot of questions both on the channel, on the show, on the Instagram, and all of that. So a lot of it is kind of, well, it's basically the same question about 100 different times, and it typically comes in over the course of, say, a month. I'll get, oh, wait, body count, already got one dead Skeeter. Over under not, so we're going to call body count about 3 Skeeters so far. That's your first one, and we're only 1 minute and 43 seconds into the show. Yeah, we got a nice little warm front come through. Anyway, I digress. Fact of the matter is we're getting a lot of questions about just Hellcat stuff, and oddly enough, it's rare to have a first-time Hellcat owner that didn't come from a Scat Pack or a Mustang or some other kind of hot rod. These are guys that are typically fairly well-seasoned with some kind of fast cars racing or something like that. So it's not like I'm telling them anything that they don't know when it comes to performance enhancing. They're already there. They already know what works. But they don't know what works with these cars. You know, they know about, you know, tires and, you know, if you put a tune on it and all of that, but it's only anecdotally. It's like you get the sense that they've read a lot, but they don't know a lot. So at least from experience with these cars specifically. So I want to talk about the Hellcats, talk about what you do, talk about what not to do, and if you choose to go down certain paths, what to expect. So, first and foremost, one of the first questions that comes up, like you wouldn't believe, would be diff braces and drive shafts. So basically, guys, I'm going to be starting at the back of the car and I'm going to be moving forward because that's how you're supposed to build a car anyway, right? So we're going to talk about diff braces and drive shafts first. First of all, and suspension components. I'm not going to gloss over tires, but that will come up at some point. Drag radials are basically a must. I'm going to assume that you already know that coming into this, but for you guys that may be super new to this level of horsepower, you're about to get a crash course in what sketchy is all about. These cars have got a lot of nannies and they'll keep you out of a lot of trouble, but they cannot bend or break the rules of physics. The laws of physics just don't work like that. When we're talking about the Hellcat, you've got to put a sticky tire on the back of it. You're planning on daily driving a Hellcat. Just know that the car can get a little bit loose in situations that you might not even expect it to get loose. I know that running this thing around on stock tires, you put the thing in sport mode and it'll try to light the tires up pretty much any chance that it gets at anything over half throttle. And it's a little bit fun and adorable when you first get one of these cars, but it gets real annoying after a while. So you're going to want to get a tire underneath it. I like the Nitto Tri-5 R2s. Good tire, they're great in the rain. But they're going to offer you up a safety measure when it comes to just general performance. You can actually drive the car without worrying about blowing the tires off all the time. Although I will caution you, you cannot just stomp the gas at 30 or 40 miles an hour, even with those tires. And that's on a stock car. So I wanted to talk about tires, just kind of get that out of the way. Yeah, if you're going to be street driving the car, you're probably still going to want to go with that higher level of traction with that drag radial. So go with what works. Tri-5s, Tri-5 R2s, ET Street SSs from Mickey Thompson, 888s, if they even make it in a 275 40. Anyway, those are the sizes that are stock, and those are the manufacturers that, or that's the size that's stock and the manufacturers that I would recommend. Just again, get a sticky tire on the thing. And if you're planning on driving this thing daily, like true daily, get used to just running the thing in street mode or put it in eco mode when it's raining outside. That'll start you off in second gear. The throttle map is real soft, and it's going to keep the thing from basically spooking you for no real apparent reason, which is what these cars are pretty good at. Again, lots of power, a little bit on the nose heavy side, but no traction. Again, that can create kind of a sketchy situation. So just know that coming into it. But again, top tip, find yourself in inclement weather, just throw the car in eco mode and you'll be just fine, typically. If you really want to be safe, put it in valet mode. Let me check in with everybody real quick. We'll get to the next topic. Let's see. Boost Hemi saying hi. What's up, man? Cam Scott saying happy Thanksgiving. What's happening? Happy Thanksgiving to you. Ryan's checking in. What up, B Mason? What up, Ryan? Modern Red Hemi saying, what up, B? Got the arm flex. I like it. ET Race say, what's up, Brian? Got the thumbs up. Modern Red Hemi saying happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I like it. So that's tires in a nutshell. That's the driving modes in a nutshell, just if you're going to be daily driving the car. Now, let's talk about, again, diff braces and drive shafts. Is a diff brace or a drive shaft necessary? Well, no, not at all. This question comes up so often that you would think that you'd be surprised that the car didn't come with a diff brace and some other different kind of drive shaft, right? But if you're not taking the car to the drag strip, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily necessary to have the diff brace or the drive shaft. You got to remember that, you know, the Demon didn't come with a diff brace, and people say, oh, the Demon's broken rear ends. Yeah, the Demon's got a two-step. So, and it's launching on a set of real sticky tires. I wouldn't worry so much about that. The main thing is, if you're not going to be taking the car to the drag strip, don't even bother spending your money on that stuff. The drive shaft is included with that for a couple of different reasons. One, if you're going to be driving the car on the street and the car never really is going to have an opportunity to hook like on a prepared surface, you're not really going to need that drive shaft. In fact, your tires are basically the fusible link in all of this. What that means is that your tires are going to spin before the drive shaft is loaded enough to put it under any real stress. And that kind of goes for the rear end as well. Now, if you're planning on racing the car, drag racing specifically, then yeah, I would recommend a drive shaft, but only if you really start pouring the coal to these things. There's plenty of guys that are running around running mid-tens, low-tens with stock drive shafts in Hellcats. The Red Eyes come with an upgraded drive shaft, same as the Demon. But the thing is that there's plenty of guys running mid to low tens with the stock Hellcat drive shaft without any real issues. Just keep a few things in mind. The one thing that will kill a drive shaft is wheel hop, really more than anything else. And, you know, when you start making big power, then you're going to need big parts to manage that downstream anyway. But until you get to that level, it's really not all that necessary. Now, you can now start talking about, well, what about upgrade parts? What would I recommend? Well, the performance rear diff brace is good. TBA Machine makes a real nice diff brace that's a whole lot easier to install. But the one thing that I'll tell you is that for the bolts that mount to the cradle, and this is something I want to make sure you guys get right off the bat. All of these diff braces, basically the idea is to locate the diff and not let it move around a whole lot under load. Well, the problem with that is that there's no real good way to do that unless you affix the thing to the cradle itself. And oddly enough, the cradle in the earlier Hellcats are threaded and the later ones aren't, but there's 2 holes there. And these diff braces come with inserts, and you just basically run those bolts up into the cradle, and it's a done deal. But it's located, and it keeps basically it's there to center and to locate that diff brace. Where guys go wrong with diff braces is they just tighten the living hell out of the locator bolts. And what the problem with that is that you have to think of this thing dynamically. When the car is under load, the diff is going to want to tilt up. It's going to want to basically, look up at the transmission, for lack of a better way of putting it. Just in this case, the axle doesn't move. It's only the diff that's moving. It's independent rear suspension, right? Well, if you over tighten those locator bolts, you basically you set the pinion angle down. Well, you don't need to do that. It's an independent rear suspension car, and any movement is going to be very slight. The issue is that you basically preloaded your diff, and you don't need to do that. The idea is just to put a little blue Loctite on them, locate everything, just get them barely wrist tight, just locate everything, and then let it ride. That's what I've done with mine, and I've had no issues. Rear end doesn't have any problems, no whining, no anything like that. But again, where I've seen guys kind of get it wrong is they over tighten those things, and that's kind of an issue. So just make sure you're following the instructions and not trying to do your own thing with those braces. And again, there's several different kinds of braces. I've got on Revlon, I've got the, I don't know, 4th, 5th generation performance, non-bushinged, that big, cool looking one. I don't have that one. I just have the regular dip brace. It seems to work just fine. But pick one, have it installed by somebody that's competent, that knows what they're doing. The TBA machine dip brace is real easy to install, as long as you've got the right tools, of course. But the idea is to make sure that you are, again, following the manufacturer's instructions and don't over tighten those bolts, please, whatever you do. Jermaine, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for the contribution, my friend. DG saying waves. Waves. Tommy's asking, are Scat Packs as loud as Hellcats? No, they're not. They have a different exhaust system. But thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. So that's diff braces in a nutshell. Again, do you need one? Not necessarily, but it's a good idea to go ahead and install one if you are going to be running the car hard, especially on a sticky set of tires. So what about axles? That's the other question that comes up. At what point do I have to have axles? And if I get a 309 rear end, which we will be talking about that here in just a second, do I need to upgrade the axles? And the short answer to that is no, you don't have to upgrade the axles. I'm still running the stock axles in Revlon, and I don't have to really ever worry at this. I don't feel like at this power level with the axles or the strength of the axles. I will say this though, that car has got a zillion different miles on it, a zillion passes at different tracks on it. And for me, it's really more about, if one did break, then I'd probably replace both sides with a set of upgraded axles. But leading up to this, I don't really see that as being necessary. And this is a car that will, turn 140 and low 150 60 foots. So that kind of gives you an idea of how that car gets out of the hole. Let's see, DG saying, come on, guys, 8 of us haven't hit that thumbs up yet. Yeah, hit the thumbs up, guys. BB78's got a question real quick saying, what a professor got the arm flex. All I can say, if you work for FCA, what engines would you design to replace the 392 and the Hellcats? Man, I got to be honest with you. I wouldn't, if I were to do a redesign of the 392, that would be kind of difficult because the 392 is already really good at what it does. I mean, the only thing you could do is would be an intake manifold redesign, which I feel like it needs. Some slight differences to the throat of that manifold would help it quite a bit. But aside from that, you know, maybe a bump in displacement. You know, 426 sounds a whole lot better, but the 392 is really good and very warrantable and very durable. So, I mean, there's that. As far as the Hellcat, man, you can't mess with perfection. The problem with the Hellcat, there isn't a problem with the Hellcat, and that's the thing. The Hellcat has proven to be overwhelmingly durable, and what I mean by that is, by comparison, you know, you look at the LS9, still pretty stout motor, but kind of small blower bummer there. But, you know, just from a durability standpoint, I've seen Hellcats go through and survive things that it should never have, you know, so there's that. I would just, if you're asking me what I would do differently with the Hellcat, man, the only thing I would do different with the Hellcat itself is offer it with a 309 rear gear. So we're going to get to that here in just a minute, but it wouldn't have anything to do engine wise, except for I would maybe go with an upgraded piston and rod from the factory. I mean, why not? It should be there. It's not like it would add a lot of cost to the car in general. So that would be the only thing that I would look at, would be pistons and rods, really, for that 392 and for this thing. And a slightly different cam profile for the 392. Let's see. Oh, V8 Power saying hardened steel axles for high horsepower. Well, yeah, for sure on that. Jermaine, hey, again, thank you very much, saying, do you think a Hellcat Viper would sell well? Okay, so let's talk about that. So Hellcat variants, right? You've got the Trackhawk, the Durango, you've got the Challenger, the Charger, soon to be the TRX, and I'm sure have I forgotten anything? Look, here's the deal. This goes back to a conversation that I had with one of the guys from FCA at the Mecum Auto Auction back in 2016. And the question is, would a Hellcat powered Viper sell well? And oddly enough, I had about a 2-hour-long conversation with the guy. It was kind of funny. I caught the guy in a kind of rarefied mood, if you will. It was just me and him hanging out. We were talking about everything that was going on with the brand Viper. In other words, what focus groups that they had done, which, by the way, the Viper did terrible in focus groups. It did terrible with female buyers for a couple of different reasons. One, they sound like a tractor with their mufflers cut off. And I should know, I've owned 3 Vipers. Number 2, there's no automatic transmission available. From a product viability standpoint, the V10 had no other home but Viper. And to be honest, the guy was real frank with me. He's like, look, dude, for this thing to be viable, it's got to be making over 700 horsepower, 750 horsepower NA. And that engine's just not going to get there, not the way that it sits, not for everything that they were going to put into it. So, and he had, you know, in confidence has said, look, you know, what we have thought about is the existing platform modified for the Hellcat powertrain, which would include 6-speed and automatic. Because the brand Viper does have a direct line of sight competitor. It's the brand Corvette. And going back to the late 90s and really only the late 90s, it was Team Viper versus Team Corvette, with Viper typically coming up on top in SCCA GT2 racing. Well, that's all fine and good, but that doesn't always translate into sales when your buying demographic is primarily dudes. You got to remember that a lot of females buy Corvettes, and because of that, not to mention the fact that Corvettes at the time were significantly less expensive than the Viper just didn't get any love, and it was supposed to be this American exotic, if you will, which it never really got that gloss. It never really could wear that gloss so well because, well, to be honest, you had the Z06, and the Z06 kept putting a number on the Viper, or at least made life a wondrous hell for the Viper, both on the street and on the track. So, long story short, would it sell well? FCA seemed to have thought so, because moving forward for Viper, that was the only viable intent for the brand. And it's funny because the other side of this was that Viper as a brand, the recidivism, in other words, the repeat buyers, the repeat offenders in this case, which I guess I am, was very low. They didn't have a lot of returning Viper owners coming back to the Viper brand. And what was odd, I'll go ahead and wrap up the answer to this comment with this. At the time, there was a white GTS sitting on the floor. I had already ordered Shalandra, and I was talking to the guy, and he goes, look, I'll tell you what, I'll give you that car. I'll sell it to you for $86,000. He goes, I can do that right now. If I did that, would you buy it? Would you cancel your order? He goes, in fact, I can cancel your order for you. I'm going, oh. I said, man, if I could afford to do that, I would. I said, but I can't. And he goes, that's exactly the problem. He goes, you won't buy that car, but you would consider a Z06. And I said, well, yeah, I guess. I mean, all things considered, the Z06, I can get an automatic. You know, if I want to drag race it, if I want to take it to an open track, it doesn't matter. I can do whatever I want with it. He's like, yeah, well, you know, you've also got the Stingray out there at 55 or 60 grand. You know, we had this long conversation, and the conversation took a lot of twists, turns, ups, downs, sideways, and everything else. But at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation, it was pretty clear that at that point in time, the Viper was not only on its way out, it was basically being shown the door and kicked out, with the understanding that at some point, if it does come back, it will come back in that configuration, with a V8 configuration. And I was even asking him, I said, look, it would be amazing if we had the Viper with the aluminum 426, the block heads, whatever you can make work, out of the drag pack cars. At the time, I think you can still get the all aluminum 426 drag pack engine. I said, why not? You know, there's got to be a way to make that work for the Viper. I mean, it's an existing platform. That's part of the conversation that we had in a version, plus a supercharged version, this version, that version. There's a lot of chat going on back and forth. And it was just a cool conversation to have. And again, that was, you know, 4 years ago. I mean, it's not like this is moving very quickly with them coming out with a new Viper, at least not that we're aware of. However, be on the lookout for something to possibly be announced in like the tail end of, or middle to tail end of 2021 on that Viper. I'm not sure if it's been green lit or not, but from what I hear, they may start taking steps to bring that back, but we'll see. Sean, thank you very much. Saying happy Thanksgiving. December 11th, HRP, am I going? Possibly. Then DG checking in. Thank you very much. Saying 4.7 of my 2045 RFE Dakota is blown. I'm torn whether to drop a 5.9 or a 5.7 Hemi, purely a street truck. Help me out with ideas. Go back in with a 4.7, man. I wouldn't even mess with a 5.9. A 5.7 is going to be kind of a pain, dude. For something like that, I'd just go back in with a 4.7, brother. I wouldn't really try to overthink that too much. If you really want to get nuts, do a full engine trans swap over 5.7 with a NAG 1. That would probably be an easier and less expensive way to go. But realistically, that 4.7 is a good little engine, man. I've always liked that engine. And, you know, I would say just go back with that. As far as hop-ups, man, I don't know. Throw a set of headers on it. I'm sure they make them. I just don't have a lot of experience with the 4.7s. And when it comes to swaps and something like that, I don't know. I'd have to say NAG 1 with a 6.0 would be pretty sick too. But I just don't know if that's going to be good enough for you, bud. But thank you very much. Appreciate the contribution. Jermaine saying, what do you think is next from FCA after the Hellcat variant? Well, here's the thing. He's asking about are you asking about for the Viper, if they do or don't make a Hellcat variant, or just the normal Hellcat stuff? If you're talking about the Viper, you know, what would be next? Well, I mean, realistically, you would be looking at either an NA V8, obviously Hemi, probably a 426, maybe just an all aluminum 392 revised intake manifold, something to stretch out the RPM on the big end. Because guys, you got to remember something about the 392. I know we're getting off topic with the Hellcat stuff, but you got to remember about the 392. The 392, when it was originally put together, was about a 505 horsepower engine, SAE net, the whole bit. With an intake that was similar to the 6.1, but with shorter runners, like significantly shorter and larger runners. The problem with that is that it didn't develop the torque down low. It's basically just a little bit more than the 6.1, but just made the horsepower up top, and the 0 to 60 times just weren't there was no improvement. There was a lot of things that just simply weren't better with that setup. When they switched everything over to the dual runner intake with that long runner up top and the short runner down low, they lost a little bit of power up top, but what they gained was a boatload of torque down low with that intake manifold. So, that's kind of the quick history of the 392. It's why it works so well. And realistically, if you were to just shorten up the long side, make the runner slightly larger in general, then that would suit the weight of that car a lot better and allow that engine to spin with a revised camshaft. It would allow the engine to spin up to, say, 6,500 RPM. And that's really what you would need for a car like that. So anyway, that's what I would personally do. I would go with what we've already got. Let's see. Make sure, let's see, here we go. Margaret, he's saying 426 LOL. Yeah, that probably will never happen. Ace Club saying, I have long tube catless header, straight pipe. What else can I do to make my idle louder? I don't know that there's anything else that you can do to make it any louder. I think you pretty much hit the loud jackpot with that setup, my man. V8 Power saying, you could drive the Hellcat to work. Tell you what, so here's the thing. Let's get back to the Hellcat stuff. And V8 Power saying kind of brings up a good point. For the guys that do daily these cars, the highest mileage I think was 148,000 that I saw on a Hellcat, guy that was literally daily driving this car. So there are guys that do daily these things. So there is that. So if you've ever wondered what a high mileage Hellcat looks like, it just looks like a normal Hellcat. They're so durable. The cars are pretty butch in that respect. Let's see. Greg Fitch is asking, what are your thoughts on engine oil, specifically Pennzoil, Royal Purple, etc., and 040 or thicker? Nuvet uses different oil if you track it. Yes, it does. So a couple of things on oil. Don't overthink oil, first of all. If it's synthetic and it's 040, you're in good shape. Don't worry about it. As far as which oils perform better under independent testing, well, Pennzoil does well. Mobil 1 does well. Royal Purple, on the other hand, doesn't. At least I haven't seen UOA, which is Universal Oil Analysis. A company called Blackstone Labs is the one that's typically used for those. I haven't seen a UOA on Royal Purple look all that great. And I don't care what kind of oil it is. If it does well, it does well. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And like I said, I just haven't seen a good looking UOA come back on Royal Purple. Valvoline is good. Obviously, Castrol's in the mix as well. So as long as you're working with a name brand, known value motor oil, you're going to be in pretty decent shape. And that goes for, Amsoil as well. Any of the more boutique types of brands, you'll do just fine with that too. So, but as far as, who does the best, I think Amsoil or Redline may be at the very top of that list, followed by Pennzoil and then Mobil 1. But I'm going to throw this in the mix real quick. As long as you're changing your oil, you're already off to a good start. Make sure that you're changing your oil, my personal opinion, no more than 4,000 miles. I know that you'll hear people say you can change it at this interval or that interval. In the owner's manual, it states do not let the thing go over 6,000 miles between oil changes, which I can completely understand. But here's the thing. If you're changing it at 4,000 miles, you're doing good. If you're running the car hard, I would say change it at 3,000 miles. The harder you maintain your car, the better it will serve you. And the harder you drive your car, the harder you need to maintain it. So again, oil quality, please don't overthink it. They're all good. Just make sure that you're changing it, make sure that you're checking it. And really that's about the end of that part of the chat when it comes to oil. What'll happen, well, it is, but it's not. So that's kind of the full stop. Just change the oil and use good oil. Also, make sure you're swapping out your filter. I like to use the SRT filter from Mopar. Seems to do really well, but as long as you're using, like a Bosch filter, a Mobil 1 filter is also a really good filter. Those are going to work out just fine. And again, change it regularly and you'll be doing great. Let's see. Make sure I'm not forgetting anybody. Ace Club saying 5.7. V8 Pirate saying Viper will always be a 10-cylinder. No. Not if what the guy from FCA was telling me. I mean, there may be some contingent of guys that are going to want to hang on to that tradition, but I'll put it to you like this. When the Viper was being developed, Carroll Shelby himself didn't like the idea of the V10. The only problem is that was the only way at the time to reach the power number that they were trying to get to and still pass emissions and a few other things. But yeah, the original concept cars, I believe, all had 360s, and the idea was to actually go with an all aluminum 360, if memory serves me correct. It's been a while since I read the book, but yeah, that was already not on the approved list. Shawnee is asking, Hellcat short block or piston repair in his situation, thoughts, upgraded pistons. So here's the thing. I'm gonna circle this back around, kind of keep us on topic here with this Hellcat 101 type deal. So in Sean's situation, Sean had a situation where he had a pinched ringland or pinched ring and popped a ringland in cylinder number 1 on his car. Options for repair. Well, the first option is to go with a factory short block, one of either a Hellcat short block or a built short block, as opposed to just buying a piston and a rod, or if it's needed, but in this case, just a piston, and whatever machining may need to take place to the cylinder in the process, which would probably amount to basically boring the whole thing 10 over. Well, what would I do? I would go with a built short block from probably Arrington. Just go with a more or less a factory replacement with better internals. The long and short of it is that you're going to be replacing parts anyway. You don't want to just bore one cylinder over, which could, again, potentially be the issue. And especially if that cylinder is scored in any way, that's going to create other issues as well. So I would say use that block as your core, ship that back to them to cover your core charge, and then run with a, like Muller pistons and rods, something just a built short block, built rotating assembly, stock displacement. I would not advise at all going larger displacement or going with a different camshaft in your build, primarily because that's going to require significant changes to pulleys, pulley ratios, things like that are going to have to be increased. It's just taking on more cost along the way. So with the Hellcat's a unique car. If you want to make more power, just throw more boost at it and better fuel at it. And that's typically how these things work. So hopefully that answers your question. That's the route that I would go. Um, let's see. V8 Power Staying Z06 was a 405 horsepower track car back in the day. I know, I owned one. The Viper was around that same power rating. Actually, Viper was 450 horsepower. The funny thing is that the Z06 had a 342 gear and more aggressive gearing in the transmission, which meant that the Z06 and the Viper were nose to nose, dead even. First gear, second gear, third gear, going through just basically running the cars. With the Viper, once you hit fourth gear, the Viper would just start motoring away from the Z06. But it was always funny to me that first, second, and third gear, stock for stock, they were practically identical. The higher winding LS6 versus the V10s, bigger torque, but not as much gearing as the Z06. Z06 had 342 gearing, and the Viper had 308 gears or 309 gears, 30 something gears, basically relatively close to or more or less the same as the Hellcats, as a matter of fact. Let's see. So getting back to the Hellcat stuff, because that's really what we're talking about tonight. Basically, Hellcat 101. So we've talked about tires. We've talked about suspension bits, sort of, with that diff brace. One of the questions that's come up a lot too is, what about trailing arms, control arms, things like that? Actually, the BMR lower trailing arms are really the only thing that I noticed any marginal difference with how the car would act on the street with street tires in terms of any kind of wheel hop, stuff like that. Typically, wheel hop, though, is going to be a function of just basically having the wrong tire pressure. If you're at the drag strip, obviously, inconsistent track prep or, street tires, if you're on a test and tune night and street cars tear up the track, then that can cause some potential issues as well. But as far as helping the car to hook, there's not really a lot going on back there because it's independent rear suspension. And really the only thing that you're trying to do is just keep everything located properly. Have a little bit beefier lower trailing arm, but to go like a full set, like a full spawn set, and if you guys have seen my how-to video on that, I did a full how-to video how to install the spawn system in the car. And the downside to the spawn is that it's noisy and the thing is clicking and clacking constantly back there. And not to mention the fact it's a nightmare to install if you've never done it before. And if you have done it before, you'll know that you don't ever want to do it again, at least not anytime soon. And that's kind of the whole gist of that. But again, BMR lower trailing arms probably be a decent place to go there. Now, getting into the drive shaft portion of it, again, like I've said earlier, there's plenty of guys that are running mid-second passes with these things. But a lot of those guys are running those mid-10-second passes with a stock drive shaft with 309 gears. And that's something that I want to emphasize here is that when it comes to modifications, where do you start? What's the beginning? Where's the ending and all of that? The best place to start with a Hellcat is a set of 309 gears, in my opinion. A set of 309 gears and a pedal commander are really all you need for your garden variety 1060 on a tire car. And a lot of guys will say, but look, there's so many other cars going so much faster. Let me explain something to you. You will not ever hook up with a set of ET Street Rs, drag radials, or whatever on the street with a set of 309s and a pedal commander set up to be a little bit more aggressive so that you get a little bit better throttle response, because the 309s do kill some of the throttle response. It's a load-based thing, and I'll just leave it at that. Just know that if you get a 309 gear, you either need a tune or you need that pedal commander. Now, I'm going to take that one step further. If you're running the car at the drag strip, you're going to want to get a tune primarily because you could run into a 1 to 2 gear yip. It'll just basically kind of nose over on the 1-2 shift. Super common. A tune solves it, but honestly, guys, with a stock Hellcat, I didn't really notice a yip until my car was running deep into the 10s, like 1030s, 1020s. So, and that was on an unlocked computer, by the way, with a 309 gear. So just know that coming into the conversation, you're only really going to notice it if you're taking your car to the dragster regularly on a drag pack wheel and tire setup. Honestly, that's the only time you would notice it, and I really wouldn't worry about it too much. It's just part of the ownership experience, so to speak. But what does that get you? It'll pick you up at least a tenth and a half and about 2 to 3 miles an hour on the back end of the drag strip. It just allows the car to pull better up top. If you're into doing roll racing or anything like that, you're going to be able to capture a better mile an hour at the big end up to about 140. It is going to help you. So just know that coming into the conversation, you'll be basically 2 car lengths ahead of a 262 gear car at about 135 miles an hour. So that's going to be the end of your, that's going to be right as you're shifting into 6th gear at about 132. That's where you're going to really be putting links on a 262 gear car. So that's basically your rear end in a nutshell. I'm going to answer some more questions and I'll get back into the Hellcat stuff here. Let's see, V8's talking about the Dakota, the 318. Let's see, SRT saying best spark plugs for a Cam 392. The NGK TR, the whatever it is, the 6 heat range. I can't remember the part number off the top of my head. I should know that. In fact, I used to know that off the top of my head. Anyway, the 6 heat range, basically stock. The stock plugs are going to do you just fine. And that's another thing, guys, don't overthink spark plugs. Don't put E3, whatever, just no, stick with the NGKs, stick with the stock stuff. You'll be just fine. Just make sure that you're gapping them properly. For the stock stuff at 45, 045, basically 45 thousandths. For the boosted stuff around 25, 27 thousandths. Slash saying happy turkey day, man. Shiv saying, yo, what's up, Mr. R&D? Got the ball guy with the shades and the arm flex. I like it. Hope everything's going good with you, man. Going good here. Let's see. HE37's saying, I own a supercharged Mustang. Rather than changing the viscosity of the oil, I'm thinking about using an oil with good film strength. Any recommendations? AMSOIL has a line that is really good. I think it's a 1040 or a 040 that's got real good film strength. Check out their website. I can't remember the line of it, but I know that there's some turbo guys that kind of swear by AMSOIL. And I think a lot of that has to do with it's got a good viscosity at high temperatures. So I would look at that and probably go with one of those products. Go with one of the higher tier like Redline or AMSOIL. Those are going to have typically those will have a higher film strength. But you get down into like the royal purples and anything like that, not so great. But we ran, for the supercharged Mustangs, we ran all Pennzoil in those at the shop. Ship saying, hit that like button. Yeah, hit the like button, guys. Let's see. Matt saying, hey, B, love your videos, knowledge, and attitude about cars. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Let's see. SRT Mark saying, Ace Club, get a cam. Everything needs a cam, man. Except for a Hellcat. Unless you're pulling it up, and then that's a different story. Matt's saying, what's your opinion on the 3.6 Pentastar, and what would you do to it to make it a fun and fairly competitive street car? Would you say it's more reliable than a 5.7? Fun question, man. I wouldn't say that it's more reliable necessarily. But on one hand, I would say that it is, because look at it like this. The Pentastar gets work like a rented mule, man. That thing, as far as, I tell you what, if you take care of a Pentastar, chances are it's going to be taking really good care of you. Those things, in terms of maintenance, people just don't maintain them as much because they're the entry-level car, they're cheap transportation. You get the idea. The funny thing is that if you look at a Pentastar, what is that thing? 300 horsepower and it's 3.5 liters. A 5.0 makes 460 horsepower and it's 5 liters. it's kind of close to the specific output of a 5-liter when you want to look at it like that. I mean, it's a pretty advanced engine, and it's kind of on its own little island. Dual overhead cam, V6, moderate displacement. The thing's begging for a set of turbos as far as I'm concerned, but obviously the internals really won't manage it. What can you do? Well, here's the thing. They will take to a tune fairly well. It's just that a lot of guys don't bother tuning 3.6s because, to take something from, more or less 300 horsepower and drag it up to 320 horsepower, is it worth it? I don't know. That's up to you, but you can tune them. Transmission tuning obviously is going to be a big ticket, or a big mover of the needle when it comes to performance with that. It's not a big ticket item. That's what I was trying to say. Although it is expensive to unlock the computer and go through all the things you need to do to tune a 3.6. Yeah, you can make them a lot of fun. And unfortunately, man, the 3.6 just doesn't get a lot of love, which bums me out because, I love the 5.7, but it's interesting to me that the 5.7 gets completely eclipsed by the 392, which is completely forgotten once you start talking about Hellcat stuff. It's weird. The way that Mopar stuff waterfalls is interesting to me. The V6 Camaro, a perfect example of this. V6 Camaro is a bad little car. I mean, a lot of people don't realize how fast that little thing is. So there's that to consider. But when you start looking at, what can you do? Obviously tuning. Put the thing on E85, hit it with a shot of nitrous. There's little things that you can do to it that'll make it a whole lot of fun. Exhaust is kind of it's always going to be a subjective thing. So, whether you go with, there's a few exhausts I think that are out there for that car, but, basically anything that'll help lighten the thing up somewhat. So I'd go with like a MagnaFlow or a, Corsa, whatever you like. But I have heard some of them sound pretty good. And the one that I did hear that did sound good was the MagnaFlow kit. So again, keep in mind that we did not have a lot of exposure with the V6 in the Mopar products. Had some exposure to the V6 on the Mustang side with the Pro Charger and all of that. And I know that, Rip makes a kit for the 3.6. Does pretty good. I think, reliably supercharging, you can drag about 400 horsepower out of the thing. But here's the cool thing. It's 400 horsepower out of a V6. It's going to remain more balanced than a V8 because it's simply less weight. And I know that there's a lot of guys that are running around out there, and this is very true not only of the Challengers, but of other platforms as well. The Mustang with the Terlingua, if you guys aren't familiar with that, it's the Shelby Terlingua was the kind of a hot rod V6 version of the Mustang, where guys would take the suspension. It was basically a suspension setup, but it was just real easy on the driver. It didn't overpower the car, and those things, although they didn't get a lot of pub, if they're in their right environment, they're a riot. They've got basically the same power to weight ratio as like a 350 or a 370Z, for example. So a lot of fun, great handling, and you can put a blower on the thing and make a ton of power. So there's that. Again, the problem with the Pentastar, you have to remember one thing, guys. The problem with the Pentastar is that it's shackled by the weight of the LX platform itself. There's nothing weak about that engine. I mean, it's a 300 horsepower engine. I know we're living in an era where 300 horsepower doesn't mean anything, but it's still a fair amount of power. And again, in a smaller car, it is actually pretty lively, but in the LX platform, it's just a little bit heavy, but it'll still get down the road just fine. Again, was it the RIP supercharger, whatever it is, that thing? Yeah, it works, and that's about as far as I would take that thing. I don't think the internals are awesome, so, but it is what it is. I mean, it's a high compression dual overhead cam engine. Again, it's just shackled by weight, and that's the bummer of it, but it's actually a neat little engine. I'll put it to you like this. Could you imagine that engine, but just a larger displacement with as a V8, a 5.7 Pentastar dual overhead cam? That'd be pretty sick. SRT Mark saying he uses Lucas. Lucas is good. DG's checking in with Amsoil. Jamie's asking, for a strictly street car, would you rather have a stock Hellcat or a cammed 392? For a strictly street, cam 392 all the way. For the main reason that you can use the power all the time. Now, that being said, if you want to use a Hellcat's power all the time, it's just a push of a button away. Put it in 500 horse mode. So there's that. You know, with the Hellcat, the funny thing about the Hellcat is that you get several cars in one. But if a cammed 392 is done right, it is a lot of fun to drive, and there's a lot of theater that comes with it. So depending on what I'm going to do with it, if I lived nowhere near a drag strip and all I did was just play with the car, and you know, I wasn't street racing it, it was just something that I was, you know, going to take out and go for a rip every once in a while, maybe do road trips or something like that. It'd be tough to beat. A properly cammed 392 is a real hard car to beat. In fact, I'll take it a step further. A properly cammed and properly set up 1320, I mean, that's a 10-second car, guys. So, you know, at that point of it, it's, you know, how deep in the tens do you really want to go? Given the fact that with a Hellcat, you're not even in the throttle fully until about 50 miles an hour. It's funny, a thing will go 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. You're not even at wide open throttle to get it to go 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. That's the power that you're dealing with. That's the driving, and that's on, by the way, a set of drag radials. That's what you're up against when you're talking Hellcat versus 392. 392 on the same tire, especially a cam 392 on the same tire, you roll into that throttle really hard and it's immediate hit. It launches, it takes off. And yeah, there's still enough power there to light the tires up on a set of drag radials and keep you very entertained. But the better part of that is that you're pretty much done by about 120, 125 with a 392. The Hellcat, it doesn't even see 120 miles an hour. It goes by so fast. It's like 120, it's done. So from that standpoint, you get the same noise. With the cam 392, you get more theater with the idle, depending on how cam you went. Just don't go too far. In fact, I'll be doing a video on 392, what not to do, for a live chat, probably on the next live chat. And part of that is going to be choosing the right cam for your 392, because you can butcher yourself pretty good by not going with the right cam in that respect. Let's see. So chatting about the Hellcat, let's get back around to the Hellcat. So we've talked about tires, which is kind of a given. We've talked about the rear end. We've talked about swapping the 309 in, and we've talked about drive shafts. So now what's next? Well, we're going to start looking at exhaust. What type of an exhaust works for the Hellcat? So let me just tell you what I've done and the experiment that myself and a couple of buddies of mine have done with the Hellcat, and you can make this decision on your own whether you want to go this route. Number one question that always comes up about exhaust: it's never long tube headers. It's never about a cat back with a Hellcat. It's always about the catalytic converter delete. Should you do it? And there's some things you can do. There's some products you can buy that will fool the rear O2s into thinking you've got cats and all of that. What I'm talking about is just from a sheer performance standpoint. Will the car go faster without catalytic converters? The short answer to that is no, it won't. As a matter of fact, funny you should ask. So this goes back a couple of years ago. All of us had, we're talking about 3 different cars. All of us were in roughly the same state of tune, meaning stock or ECU tune, but nothing really else done to the cars. And this was, I think it was in March or February when we were doing this testing. And basically what we did is we pulled the cat pipes off the car and put the cat delete pipes on. And did the cars pick up anything? Actually, no. In very similar DA, believe it or not, with the cats out of the car, there was zero difference, or the car was slightly slower. Now, when I say slightly, we're talking 100th or 200ths of a second here, and nothing that you would really be able to measure in mile per hour. Probably DA dependent here, but here's the twist. The car didn't go any faster. Really, that's more the point of this. So because it didn't go any faster, why wouldn't it have gone any faster? And there's a lot of anecdotal things behind this. You know, the cats, people talk about back pressure and this and everything else. Look, the cats flow enough to satisfy the flow requirements of the Hellcat. Imagine that, a component that's designed to work with the power plant that it's bolted to. And so there's that. And so we couldn't find any honest to goodness reason to remove the cats because there was no performance to be gained. So move into, well, let's talk about a couple of the same cars, or at least one of those same cars to this day. That car has now got a pulley upgrade, injectors, and a few other modifications to it. Basically, in slack DA, the car is a 10.0 car, and will run 10.0s and high 9s if it really gets cold, but realistically 10.0 car, right? That car still has the factory catalytic converters on it. In fact, the guy that owns the car that took the cats off thinking he was getting a performance gain, put the cats back on the car, and there they remain to this day. So, and this is a car that runs at the drag strip extremely frequently. And again, it didn't hurt performance whatsoever, even in a 10.0 car that has gone as fast as 140 miles an hour in the quarter mile. So the removal of the cats won't do you any good. Keep it mean, keep it green, and leave the catalytic converters on the car. Oh, and speaking more on exhaust, if you want to put long tubes on the car, I'll highly suggest that you don't. When it comes to exhaust scavenging, you've got this big, humongous scavenger pump sitting right on top of your engine. There is no exhaust scavenging. When you have positive displacement, or really any blower for that matter, but especially with a positive displacement supercharger, the second you tip into the throttle and you have manifold pressure, when the intake valve or when the exhaust valve is open and it's starting to close and the intake valve opens up, there's positive pressure behind it, and it is blowing everything out of that cylinder, trust me. And it doesn't take very much cylinder pressure to do that anyway, so don't worry about long tubes, are not going to do you any good. We've tried. By the way, strangely enough, I've actually dynoed Hellcats with stock manifolds, stock exhaust, with cat delete, basically the Bravo package, which would be 10% lower pulley, 275 upper pulley, and all the goodies and gizmos and gadgets to make it work with the 85. And the stock system made the stock everything basically except for the cat delete made the same power as long tube headers and everything else you could think of, aftermarket cat back, the whole bit. They basically made identical power. So you know, when you're talking about 800 horsepower to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno that was at the time known for being very, very pessimistic in terms of power output, yeah, I would say that you're probably going to be in that, I don't know, in that range where you're just never going to need to put that type of exhaust on your car. But guys will do it. I keep telling them, don't waste your money. But, you know, some folks just don't like to listen. Let's see. Let's see. Sean's going to get back to some questions. We'll get back to the Hellcat stuff here in just a second. We'll be starting to talk about fuel tuning, boost, and all that kind of stuff here in just a second. But let me get to you guys real quick. Sean's asking, what's up, everyone? Has anybody noticed how expensive Dodge has become during the pandemic? I haven't noticed anything like that. DG saying, try to find a good Cabernet. Satui Vineyard in Napa Valley. SRT Mark, so I recently put cats on my Nag 1 car after my build because my car wouldn't pass without them. But I've seen 15 plus 392s pass, but I kept failing readiness. Can I buy catless mids again and pass in the future? Probably not. The protocol that you have is a little bit different than the 392s. And a lot of times, if those guys are tuned, there's going to be some things in the tune that'll allow them to have a readiness, but not functioning. It'll be readiness, but non-functioning portion of the tune. Basically, you're adjusting an engine coolant temperature parameter in there for the rear O2s. Sean B saying, I didn't know Arrington was still around. Arrington is still around, as far as I know. I haven't heard anybody saying they went out of business anytime soon. They were purchased, though. They did get bought, but they are still around. Dr. Div is in saying, what's up? Good seeing you. Let's see. Oh, he's talking about spine control arms being noisy. Yeah, they are real noisy. DG's asking, what is a pedal commander? A pedal commander is a signal intercept device. Basically, what it is it will it is installed between the throttle pedal and the computer. And what it does, it basically tells the computer that you're commanding more throttle than you really are, or less throttle than you really are, depending on your settings. And it's basically it's a non-invasive way to get some a little bit more throttle response, a little bit more feel underfoot, so to speak, out of your car. That's what the pedal commanders do. I've installed them on Mercedes, BMWs, and things like that, and it's kind of cool because, and it's funny, I still to this day feel like with all the gadgets, gizmos, and contraptions that these modern cars have, how they don't have a throttle response table that the driver can adjust, chill it out or make it more aggressive or whatever. You get a little bit of that with your driving modes, but just to have that as a separate thing would be really cool. SRT Mark's checking in with DG, just saying the same thing. And Doc Div saying 040, talking about oils. Signature Series stock engine 1550 race series for the built stuff. No Hellcat needs a cab. Doctor is saying Hellcat needs a cam when you're not in denial. Well, that's funny. You really want to chat about that? Saying just kidding. And he's saying the 3.6 likes nitrous until it burns a valve. Well, there's that. Kobe's checking in with the arm flexes. So here's the thing. Yeah, I mean, if you want to pulley the living hell out of your Hellcat, yeah, cam, you'll make some power with a cam, but I would say for the guys that are just getting into Hellcats, probably not the conversation to have with them just yet. DG saying thanks on that. So Ship Nation's asking, how often do you recommend antifreeze flush on a 392? Is it hard to burp the system? No, it'll burp itself. How often do I recommend it? I would say probably, they say that it's antifreeze for life or whatever. I don't believe that. I would say about every 50,000 miles, it's a good idea to flush it. Just my opinion. Get the old stuff out, get the new stuff in. A lot of that has to do with the fact that there are anti-corrosive additives that are in the antifreeze, and they just become consumed over time. It's just like anything else. It kind of goes into the oil, okay? The oil itself is probably just fine. It's the ad pack that gets used up over time. That's why you need to be recycling your oil. But again, it's the ad pack that goes away. Kind of the same thing with, coolants. It's just a good idea to swap it out. Swap it out more often if the vehicle is not used very often, by the way. I would say about every 30,000 miles if you're not driving the car very regularly. Oh, Doc Diff on the MagnaFlow thing, say 100% MagnaFlow on the V6. I'm a 100% Flowmaster fan. Let's see. Talking about the sound of the 40s. Yeah, I love the way the Flowmaster sounds. That's what I put on Sierra's set of 40 series Flowmasters. Matt saying, thank you for the answer, man. Man, I appreciate that, brother. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. Let's see. The boys checking in saying, yo, man, what's up, Dim? 3500 saying, hey, you still going to Royal Purple? Yeah, it is now Houston Raceway Park presented by Pennzoil. Did you saying 40s for drone? Yeah, but they sound good. And then John Cassie's asking, hey, Professor, if you get the 309 option for the factory, do they adjust the tune? Yes, they do. That is in the Red Eyes. With the extra power of the Red Eye, is there additional upgrade considerations over the Hellcat? Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you. No, I wouldn't consider there to be any other considerations, one versus the next. In fact, aside, if you've never driven the two back to back, the big difference between a Red Eye and a regular Hellcat is that a Red Eye is going to have a bit more punch down low. But aside from that, they're pretty much identical going through the gears. Again, nothing major down low, but they do seem to have more grunt than a Hellcat will, even 309 to 309 gear. But where that horsepower goes in Red Eyes, I just don't know. I know that there's guys that have been able to cover numbers with Red Eyes that the Hellcats haven't, but all of that has been down low. And I can tell you that, or let me rephrase that, all of that increase in performance, if you want to call it that, has been the result of the cars just being able to get out of the hole a little bit better than the Hellcats due to the torque that they're making down low. But I just haven't really seen anything that would tell me that you would need to do more to a Red Eye than you do to the Hellcats. And keep in mind, there's a lot of mid to low 9-second Hellcats floating around out there with not a lot done to them. Chris Crawford's asking, what hood is on the black car behind you? That is an old Harwood cowl hood. It is that is Foxy, my Fox body. Catalyst checking in. Thank you very much. Saying, what do you like about Challenger over Mustang and vice versa? Awesome question, because you're talking yin and yang here. What I mean by that is this. Let's talk the 392 cars primarily, the 392 and the 50, the NA stuff. And I'm not going to talk about potential. I'm just going to talk about how these things run from the factory. And what I mean by yin and yang is this. You'll also hear me talk about Mustangs and Challengers being bookended from each other, which is a really nice way to say you get two completely different driving experiences from these cars. So when you're talking about the Challenger 392, you're talking about lots of torque down low, lots of grunt, big car doing big car things. Yeah, it kind of flattens out a little bit on the far right-hand side of the dyno chart, but all the fun you're going to have in that car is just playing around with it on the street or at the drag strip, whatever the case is. It's got to be caught to be beat. That thing is going to come out of the hole hard, and it's always going to be a lot of fun and really torquey to drive. It's the quintessential in a big block feel is what you're going to glean from that 392. A lot of people love that. It's very endearing. Most people, when they drive one of the 392 cars, one of the big takeaways that they have is the car is just a real happy car. And that's something that they really do kind of, one of the big selling points of the 392 cars, that they're so responsive and so punchy down low. And again, it's more of that big block type of feel, where the Mustang, complete polar opposite of that. Lifeless down low, get the thing to about 4,000 RPM though, and that's when things get real interesting in that car. They pull like a freight train on the top end, primarily due to the fact that they just breathe so well because of the heads that they have and the fact that they're continuously variable cam timing with intake and exhaust lobes on both sides. It's just able to move a ton of air up top and it can rev to the moon. Again, it's a completely different driving experience than what you're going to have with the 392. Now, you start getting into modifications and things like that, it's really not a fair comparison. Not that the Mustang does better with mods or that the 392 does not do well with mods or whatever the case is. It's just that if you start modding something, then it doesn't matter. All bets are off, right? You know, if I want to really mod a 392, then what you do is you just use a shorter stroke, put a positive displacement supercharger on it, put an HP90 transmission behind it, and now all of a sudden you've got a Hellcat. See what I mean? So basically what I'm saying is this: the Mustang is great at being a Mustang. The ergonomics in that car are fantastic. They're much more efficient at the use of space than the Dodge is. So there's that as well. Not that the ergonomics in the Challenger are bad. In fact, Challenger is extremely comfortable to drive. But when you look at just the use of space, the Mustang is better. The technology group in the Mustang is also really good, but it's just different. And the big difference here also is that the Challenger is a big car. It's a muscle car, whereas the Mustang is a pony car. I wouldn't really consider it a muscle car in that it's just, it doesn't have the grunt that I think a muscle car needs to be called a muscle car, but it is a true pony car in the respect that it's a high winding small block and it does a very good job at what it does. So that's basically the difference for me between the two cars. You could have both of them in your driveway and have a completely different driving experience, one to the next, and one is not better than the other. It's just different than the other, and that's why I like them both equally. Let's see. Quick Breaks checking in saying, I wish I had my CDO1 combo and the F8 Green 1320. Happy Thanksgiving, my friend. Happy Thanksgiving, buddy. Thumbs up and fist bump. Mustang Labs, how did you hook up the NOS in the under the passenger seat in the RX-7? Very carefully. Clutch 392 saying, Sniper Cam for 392. What kind of numbers would I be putting down? It depends on the dyno. You'd be right around 500 horsepower to the rear wheels, give or take, with power gains pretty much everywhere. In fact, Quick Bricks got a cam basically just like that Sniper Cam, and it will walk away from any stock cam 392. Let's see. HU37 saying, when it comes to long tubes, I would think you would get some benefit with a centrifugal supercharger because the way it makes power as opposed to a car with a positive displacement supercharger. Yeah, it's sorta. The only thing is when you go watt with a centrifugal supercharger car, you're in boost. I mean, there's a couple of pounds, 3 pounds of boost, but you're still in boost, and it negates some of the benefit that you got from the long tube headers. I'm not saying that there's no benefit. I'm just saying that your benefits are diminished. Really, at that point, it's going to be packaging. You know, how well does whatever exhaust system you have package in the platform that you're working with? Because realistically, that's the end result. If this is a street car, it's got to be easily maintained and all of that. So I would say that as long as it packages well, yeah, throw the headers on. I just don't expect to see the huge gains that you might get with a really well sorted out high compression NA combo. Let's see. Clutch 392 is checking in with Sean E. Let's see. And them boys checking in and say, hey B, I got my 4-gen Camaro SS, but unfortunately I had to sell my 14 GT, but I have a T-top now. Nice. I like it. I like the 4th gens. So anyway, getting back to the Hellcat stuff, talking about boost next. Where do you draw the line? What kind of fuel will support what? All of that has to come into the conversation here. So, stock boost is going to be around 11 pounds of boost, give or take, depends on atmospheric conditions. So in knowing that, what do you do with building boost? How do you build more boost into this thing? Well, you can go with, whatever assortment of pulleys that you want to try to throw at it, whether it's a lower pulley, an upper pulley, or a combination of the two. Here's the thing. My only real rule of thumb when it comes to pulleys is anything more than a 285 upper is really testing the limits of fuel quality for 93 octane gasoline for several reasons. One, these cars are heavy. You've got a lot of dwell time. You've got a positive displacement supercharger, which is going to put a lot of cylinder pressure into effect for a lot longer period of time under a high inertial load. In other words, getting the car moving. So there's that. If you want to basically build a very safe combination, it's going to revolve around 93 octane. Then I would say 750 or 1000 cc injectors, just to give you some overhead. Innovators West lower pulley. The 10% lower might be stretching it just a little bit, but either way, the pulley, the injectors is really all you're going to need, along with the pump, and you'll be in good shape. When it comes to making any more power than that on 93 octane, I would say that you're probably barking up the wrong tree at that point. The reason why I say that is because from what I've seen in terms of just what the knock sensors are going to see, what short-term knock retard looks like, once you really start trying to throw the coal at it with 93 octane, the car, you can't run the timing that you need to actually make good power with the thing. So realistically, over stock, I would say that you've got an overhead of maybe 100 odd horsepower before you are really up against the limits in terms of a gain. In other words, you can pick up maybe 100 horsepower before you start to see the limits of 93 octane. Basically, on a Hellcat, this isn't all platforms, but on a Hellcat, again, because of the type of supercharger and because of the weight of the vehicle, you're looking at probably 700 to 725 horsepower on a Mustang dyno will cap you for that car. Now, what about if you want to go more aggressive? What about race gas? I don't recommend it. The reason why I don't recommend race gas is because if you're going back and forth between tunes, you got a 93 octane tune and a race gas tune. Now you're trying to mix fuel and you're trying to get the thing to a certain octane and all this other stuff. I get it. The Demon does that. That's all fine and good. You can still switch tunes with your car too if you've got the right computer or the programming software and all of that. Just know this coming into it. If you have a very hot race gas tune in your car and you're just trying to go out and crack fools with this thing, and you forget that you've got that tune in your car and you put 93 octane in it or whatever, because everybody says, oh, I'll remember to switch the tune. They don't. Nobody ever does. Then you can potentially find yourself in a bad situation. Like you can have a really bad day. So anyway, don't go that route. If you're thinking about going that route, you probably need to start looking at E85. And there's a lot of benefits to running E85 with a boosted Hellcat. Primarily, well, you've got the benefit of octane. And not to mention the fact E85 is incredibly easy to work with. It's just very kind to tuning. So, this thing working? Hang on, I think I lost it. Did I lose the feed? No.